everyone. Welcome to Talks with Gallagher. Today, I'm very honored to have Gary Wayne, and he is a prolific author, researcher, and an independent journalist from Canada, best known for his groundbreaking Genesis 6 conspiracy series books, with over 30 years as a columnist covering history, politics, ancient mysteries, and shaping the idea of understanding prehistory, especially with the Nephilim giants and the biblical rebellions, is a key to grasping end-time prophecy. Wayne's latest work, The Genesis 6 Conspiracy Part 2, dives deeper into these hidden bloodlines, celestial conspiracies, challenging readers to connect ancient patterns to modern events. So I'm just so thrilled to have you with us, Gary, on Talks with Gallagher. And I've been reading your work and following your work for a while, and I'm just very happy and honored to have you on with us today.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and looking forward to the discussion we're going to have today. I always like to get new audiences and introduce myself to them. And if we do our jobs correctly, then we're going to raise a few eyebrows today and create some curiosity, but more importantly, hopefully connect some dots.
Yes, exactly. So can you just share a little bit about your background for those that don't know you a whole lot, and like what led you to, write these books and do all the research for Genesis 6 Conspiracy?
Yeah, look at it as kicking and screaming and being stiff-necked and being dragged along. So sort of the short form is, so I got into this because I took a challenge on a Friday night with my brother and one of his friends, and basically it was, if you got enough courage, we have a book for you to read. And I had no idea what book they were going to present, and never heard of the book that they provided me. And at that time, I wasn't a Christian. I was raised, baptized as a Christian, but not continued with that as I got sort of brainwashed into high school and peer pressure and all of that sort of stuff that we all go through in the world that we live in. And so it was a book by the late Hal Lindsey, who just died recently. Was a prolific writer. And so it was The Late Great Planet Earth that I was challenged to read, and I read it, and it scared the socks off of me. And I had no idea whether or not he was quoting in context. Was it accurate? But I knew if even 10% of it was true, I needed to pay attention to this, and I didn't know anything about it. And I was a prolific reader growing up. I read all sorts of mythology, all sorts of history. And for the record, I'm not a minister. I don't believe I'm a prophet in any sort of way or classify myself as a disciple or apostle. I'm not a minister. I've not gone to seminary school, and I've not gone to university. I'm self-taught in terms of what I do and everything I did in my career, which was reasonably well successful before I retired to do this. So I'm a contrarian by nature, so I like to verify everything. So everything I do, biblically or non-biblically, I try and verify it. So that's what I did with this challenge after it scared the socks off me. But I realized I didn't know anything about the Bible of any sort of significance. And so I had to start reading the Bible. And then you realize how big the Bible is when you try and read it from cover to cover, and how long that takes, and how much that you don't understand or don't even care about in certain parts. But I got hooked in the New Testament with the first 4 Gospels, realizing when I read that sort of together, whoever this Jesus really is, based on not what the world says, but based on what was written there, he is not from this planet. He is not just human. He is preternatural in ways that we don't even understand, because nobody can speak like that as a human, totally human. So there's something unique there. And then I realized the only way I'm going to learn the Bible and to meet the challenge is I have to start logging all the different prophecy narratives, because you can look up the passages that Hal was quoting and they're quoted accurately, but are they in context? And does that fit with what else is written in the Bible? And all of those are key ingredients to get the full understanding. And that the Bible should not contradict itself if it's the Word of God, which I fully believe in. So, and I knew there was all these different approaches of eschatology that was out there after I got into this, and it was very confusing, and still is confusing, and why everybody's confused by it, because it's not designed to reconcile inconvenient passages, just reinvent what it says, and then with the collateral damage after that, so to speak. I don't mean to be too aloof on that, but that's one of the issues in why there's so much division on prophecy. So I logged all of that. It took me about 15 years over and over and over. But
Wow.
happened on the way to the Colosseum, so to speak, is you hit Genesis 6 pretty early on. Right?
You do.
And my eyes go buggy because it's like cognitive dissonance. Like whatever that is, whatever those giants are, whatever is trying to be communicated there is not what I'm here for. I'm here to understand prophecy and to understand who Jesus is. And so I ignore it as I'm going through for the first, half dozen years or so. And eventually I just say, look, these things are popping up in way too many places in the Bible and in ways people don't understand. So I started to log those as I started to go back through and make sure I wasn't missing anything. And you never get all of those as well because of those references and passages, because you don't know what you're looking for until you get deeper into it. And then you start to look, because the Bible writes in patterns.
It's cyclical, right?
MO. Yeah, it's cyclical, and it supports itself, and it adds more information, and it will give you prophetic markers or topology of all sorts of different kinds if you permit your mind to be open enough to listen to what is being told to you, which is very, very difficult, because I know this because I'm very stiff-necked. And so that's how I got there. And so after doing all of that, I decided, well, even though I don't have a university education, I have a lot of information. I've logged it in binders and prophecy narratives, and I've logged a whole bunch of other information. I could write many books. And so I thought, well, I need to figure out how to write a book. And if I could write a book, what would it be on? And could I get published? Would anybody read it? And would anybody like it? Right? And you don't know any of that. And I had no platform. And so I decided I would write a very short book and do something kind of fun, because I had all this extra information. And I said, well, if I can connect maybe Genesis 6 with the end time and just do a quick sort of template on that, then that might be kind of interesting. And so I wrote the first 10 chapters very, very quickly.
Wow.
But what was really resonating with me and would not leave me alone is that I understood that these were the same stories in prehistory that were told all around the world in other cultures and other religions. And so I knew what was talked about in Sumerian prehistory, Greek history, for just random examples, were the same stories as Genesis 6. And as I also understood this, and I wasn't very knowledgeable at this portion of it at the time, is that those religions held very detailed accounts on this and had an end time set of prophecies as well. And so I thought, okay, what I'll do is I'll put some context in. So I'm going to put in some Greek and Sumerian and Egyptian and other accounts that people might be familiar with and things that I could document versus oral traditions that might come out of the First Nations in North America or Africa, because no documentation, no veracity when you're out in the world of people assessing, like how do you back that up? How can you prove it? What else do you have? So I try and stay away from those types of things, which is not that I don't recognize the oral accounts, because I do, because I know the similarities. I don't have documentation. And as a researcher, I want to be able to have annotations in the footnotes as to where that thought came from. So I started to put that in, but then I realized I didn't understand the culture well enough for the context for Christians to understand. So then I had to read about, so when I start writing the book is about 1996 to 1997. And
wow, okay.
Then I realized I have to read more about the Vedas. I have to read more about the Gnostics. I have to read more about Zoroastrian and the Mesopotamian religions. I have to know about Egyptian religion. I have to know about the Tisha Maya Popol Vuh. So I'm now going out and seeking various polytheist scriptures all over the world so that I can accurately quote what's in there. As a parallel polytheist story through a polytheist lens, but talking about the same events and the same destination. And then as I do that, I realized that the mystery schools come out of the polytheist religions, not monotheist religions. The mystery schools are what we call all of the education system of the elite throughout our history. And so then I decide, okay, I better know a little bit more about the mystery schools. And as I dig into the mystery schools, I learn that secret societies take their beginnings back to mystery schools both before and after the flood. And I don't know anything about secret societies. So now I have to go down that rabbit hole. And I go down that rabbit hole for about a decade, and you could be down there forever. But you have to sort of sometimes come out of it and say, it's just more information of the same thing, and it's just layered in different ways. And I start, as I'm doing that, I'm feeding this into book one, and it goes from 10 chapters to 98 chapters, and you might as well say 100, because there's an epilogue and a preface in it. So it's also way too big. It's about 1,300 pages, and so I have to start figuring out how do I get it down to a size that somebody might want to publish. So that's how I got into it. And with book two that we're going to focus on more of today, I never wanted to write that book either.
Really?
So, even though I was pretty eager to do the first book, but not how it sort of came out. And it was a very stressful sort of path on that, because I would get into periods where I would say, this is just crazy. Nobody's going to believe this. Nobody's going to read it. This is nuts. I'm just going to drop it. But and I note in the introduction of book one, it's like this voice is continuing to call you, and it won't go away and you don't have any peace until you start doing what it's asking you to do, and it's to continue. And as you're going along, it's like, well, I don't have the ability to source enough information, but then everything starts to come to me in ways that you can't explain, and so any of the holes. And so it was that sort of process. And so I thought book one, it kind of did what I wanted it to do, and to do more would be redundant. But again, I wasn't listening. And I wasn't listening either to what God was telling me or what the Christians were saying, because book one is an interesting book, because it follows the House of Dragon in the various ways around the world. And it starts in prehistory, and it has an end time implication. But I'm showing how the Bible intersects with the world testimony. And I'm using a secular timeline, not a biblical timeline. But I want Christians to understand, and that there's no question that I'm quoting directly and letting them speak for themselves and not manipulating the world. They have a different view of who we are and what we believe. But they do have a recording of all of the same events, just seen through that polytheist lens, and how they plan to bring about the end time in a contrived way and before the ordained time, and with a nuanced outcome versus a monotheist. So I wanted people to clearly understand that, so you could understand the world we live in. And that's what book one does. It brings the Old Testament to life, and it gives us a way of understanding of how this world works. So book two, I thought would be redundant, and I couldn't see how I could add, even though I had more research, I didn't want to be redundant. So I did it in a way that it's like 90% new information with just enough overlap to fill in the blanks that I did in book one. But it's different because now I'm using biblical chronology, and I'm doing what Christians have asked: go deeper into the Bible than anybody else has with your kind of research, and see what you can do with it, and make sense of it. So now I'm understanding I can do things that would take just too much space and be a little bit confusing, because there's more concepts and ideas you're going to have to introduce as you start to open the doors of Old Testament passages and New Testament passages in ways that you're not taught in the church, because they don't want to teach this kind of stuff. They want to avoid it like the plague, whether it's prehistory or prophecy. So book two is specifically pointed at Christians to go deeper than they ever have, and will resolve a lot of different questions that they have in ways that haven't been done. So it is, for Christians, book one on steroids. And book 2 is also what I would say, if people are familiar with Dr. Heiser's work,
Oh yeah.
which I show, but I don't go deep in book 1 because I don't want to get people lost in the minutia. There's enough minutia there to begin with. And that I want to let the polytheists speak for themselves, or the seculars speak for themselves. So you see some of the things that would be very similar to what Dr. Heiser was working on. But in book 2, I go deeper than Dr. Heiser. So it's Dr. Heiser on steroids again.
Yeah.
And I'm going to connect all of it to the end time in ways I didn't do in book 1 and spend more time on it. So Genesis book 2 is subtitled How Understanding Prehistory and Giants helps to define end time prophecy. And that's designed to catch your attention, because part of my approach says that if you want to understand prophecy, you have to understand prehistory. Why? Because the Bible tells us this. Nothing is new under the sun. What was will be again. And the understanding of this wisdom is only going to bring grief and sorrow. And then our Messiah, our Redeemer, goes in and says, and it's going to be like the days of Noah. And Noah lives, and those are the exact same words he's quoting. Noah lived 350 years after the flood and 600 years before the flood. So we need to know more about that. And then as you dig into that, you understand a lot of the terms and context for prophecy comes out of prehistory. So if you don't understand that, you don't get the complete understanding. So what it is again, a 6,000 year adventure into the House of Dragon, but from a completely biblical perspective. And I will use some outside sources, but again, only as it connects into the Bible and provides context that I think that the reader needs.
Yeah, I love that your book has so many footnotes. And you can just go in there and just see, okay, he referenced from here and there and the other. And it just kind of, for those that love the research as well, it kind of leads them onto this, treasure trove of quest of finding some of these other puzzle pieces that you were able to put together for your books. And I find that really amazing.
I don't want to be a talking head. So even when I do interviews, I give a lot of information. And when I'm speculating, I'll say I'm speculating. And when I can, but generally I'm talking about what I can back up. And so as an author, when you don't want to be a talking head, is you want to be transparent. You want to show everywhere all along the line where this information comes from and the sources. Yes. And so just the bibliography in both books are worth having.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It leads you into, more easily into the research. And if people don't understand what we're talking about in terms of the endnotes in book 1, there's over 100 pages of endnotes. And book 2 has way more. But now they're not at the end, because now it's my second book. Now I have some credibility because it costs more to put the footnotes on the same page. But now they're there, right? So that's why publishers tend not to want to do that. And what I learned from book 1 is people don't want to continually be flipping to the back of the book.
Right. Yeah. So guys, right now, if you're watching on your smart TV, you can scan the QR code right now, and it will point you right to the page to purchase Gary Wayne's book, Genesis 6 Conspiracy Part 2. And you have it on Audible, Kindle, paperback, and your book is also wherever bookstores are sold as well. So check that out. But, I'm really curious, with doing all of this research that you have done over all these years, how has it reframed your understanding of history today?
Oh, it turned it all inside out, upside down. But you don't realize how much you've been brainwashed and how much you don't know until you learn more, right? And that's why I encourage people to learn more and try to understand this world, and also make decisions, because we have to that's why we're here, to make a choice. And you can't do that properly unless you have done the research, done the work. And even if you don't make a choice, that is a choice. So we need to understand this. And so this world is not how we've been led to think it is from those who reign over this world, the invisible ones, who the visible ones answer to. And the visible ones in their belief system and in what they say they have the genealogies and the historical records to track, are the offspring of the celestial mafia godfathers that I say tongue-in-cheek as fallen angels.
Mm-hmm.
And just in case anybody's tracking me on the word fallen angels, they'll say that's not in the Bible. They are technically correct on that, but we do have a biblical source for that. So that's just as good. So you have the offspring that come from giants, or are called giants, and that's the Hebrew word Nephil in the singular, I am for the male plural, as in the giant ones. Also can mean a bully and a tyrant, which is just things to describe giants, and we can get into that if people want to know a little bit more about that. But its source word is Nephal, N-A-P-H-A-L, and it means fallen. And so when we go to Isaiah 14, to shorten the story here, you'll have Satan who is going to fall from heaven in Isaiah 14. That word fall is Nephal. Put on the I am male plural. That's Nephilim versus Nephilim, and it means fallen one. And with the I am, it would be fallen ones. So that's where we get that from. And it's the fallen ones in Genesis 6, the sons of God.
Oh.
So it's derivative of, and so you can call the giants fallen ones as well, because it carries part of that meaning with it, but they're distinct classifications. And the giants would be called demigods because they're partly human through the sexual contact and creation, and partly divine. So you see that word as 50% human, 50% divine in terms of an angelic divinity versus the God Most High and the tripart nature of God.
You also mentioned the word mighties, which is, that's celestial mafia as well. And there seems like there's different groups and different factions. Can you kind of unpack for us curious thinkers regarding that and how that plays into what happened prehistory and what's going on today?
So when we want to understand the angels, understand there's multiple orders of angels, and they have a hierarchy. And the Hebrew word for host of heaven, and in the Bible we're told in the Old Testament not to worship the host of heaven. Right? That can mean the planets and the stars, but also as an allegory for angels. And so both in the Old Testament and the New Testament, angels have an allegory for star. So in Daniel 8, for example, in the end time, Antichrist will throw down some of the starry host, right? As a quick example. And you have stars that are classified as the seven wandering stars in the New Testament, and stars in Revelation are also allegorized as angels as well. So there's lots of examples of that, many, numerous. So when we look at host of heaven, that word host and the starry host as it's used in relationship in Daniel 8, and also note angels, host, sons of God, and hosts of God, angels, and anyways, there's another one as well. It'll come back to me, but those terms are all used for angels, and they're used interchangeably and together throughout the Old and the New Testament. So it's important to understand then that host is the Hebrew word Saba, that means an army of angels. So when it's talking about the host of heaven, you understand the dual fold implication, and that each of them would be classified as a star, and with the seven wandering planets of the seven major fallen angels. And there is a army of loyal angels, and there's an army of rebellious angels. And there is a council of God and a council of gods that run this earth. That Psalms 82 talks about, with the ruling over the 70 nations that are talked about in Deuteronomy 32, both before and after the flood. And so sons of God, angels, host of heaven, stars, those are the four, and they're used interchangeably. So you'll have, like in Job 38, 4-7, you'll also have the sons of God with the morning stars celebrating at creation. right? So just a
Right.
quick another example. And in Psalms 82, you're going to have the mighty, which is El, gods, which is El, and El is a Hebrew word for an angel or a god, can also mean mighty, and also in the superlative uppercase is the singular form of the God Most High as an El Elyon. And also as Elohim can be used as all three, depending on the context of the presence of the Ruach of the Elohim that we would know of as the Holy Spirit, and for the Word of God, which is in the New Testament, the word logos of the God Theos. The cognate term in the Old Testament is Jehovah of the Elohim, introduced to us first in Genesis 2:4. But he is there, and he explains that to us as the light in Genesis 1:3, and as Amar when God speaks, Elohim Amar. He's the word and creates all things, and it brings everything sort of together. So when you understand there's rank and order, Satan sits over a council of gods in Psalms 82 that runs this world. And at one time they walked amongst us. And that's where the pantheons of polytheism come from all around the world.
And where in that time line did that occur? Did it happen, in the garden, or did it happen before the garden, or all the above?
Yeah,
because I was
it's
listening
a really good question.
I was listening to a podcast you did with another person, and you were mentioning about, it was the first human being wasn't necessarily Adam himself, correct?
Yeah. Yes, but understand the same species, because Adam
Same species
is the same word that's used in Genesis 1 as well. But Adam is a derivative of that, just as Nephilim is a derivative of Nephal. So when we look at the creation of Adam and its relation to the angelic rebellion, it's kind of one of those key things you need to sort of understand to figure out what's going to happen and roll forward.
Yeah.
So what happens with Adam and Eve, I mean, he's created with the introduction of Jehovah of the Elohim, who's formally introduced. Something different is happening there. Again, not that he's not the light in Genesis 1:3, as he says in John 1:8. Not that he didn't create the whole world as the world, as he says in John 1 and in Colossians 1, because when God speaks, Amar, the Hebrew word, that's the word, right? He's the word of God, Jehovah of the Elohim. And he's the one who's going to have all this interaction with Adam and with the patriarchs after that through the Seth line, and with Israel in the New Testament or the Old Testament. So he's going to breathe into Adam and create things. And then you're going to have a different creation and some different details of that order in Genesis 2 versus Genesis 1. And so you start to get into, well, what's going on here, and why is there this special breath or ruach, and that is seemingly different than in Genesis 1. And in Genesis 1, you have male and female created at the same time, likely in multiple numbers, and told to multiply around the earth. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to do that, right? You'd have to,
right?
right? And to be nomads. And the food that they're eating is generally thought of as vegetarian. But what our sort of history tells us, there's this meat aspect that they're going to eat, whereas the Adamites are going to be agrarian and aren't going to eat meat until after the flood, when Noah, who is a man of the soil, is now they're permitted to eat. So at some point in time, there's a corruption that goes on there by implication. And we get this beast of the field showing up in the garden, named the serpent, Hebrew Nahash. And Nahash means a serpent. Don't confuse it with seraph, as a lot of people do.
What's the difference for those that don't know?
Well, you can use seraph as a serpent as in terms of a poisonous or a fiery serpent, but only those two applications. A serpent is generic for a serpent. Seraph also has another meaning, that's a seraphim, serpent-faced, six-winged dragon angel.
Oh, in the throne room, right?
In the throne room, yeah. And so it's important to understand the context and the application here. So when we're looking when we're looking at this Nahash, it has a root word, Nahash spelt the same way, Nachash. In this case, the CH is an H sound versus sometimes it's a K sound in Hebrew. So you have to be careful with that. Some people will say Nakash, and I understand that. I used to say that as well, but I got corrected on that a few times, so I can pronounce it properly now. And it goes back to another Nahash word that means a necromancer, an enchanter, a sorcerer. And those are terms for polytheist priests and priestesses.
Interesting.
So now you have this beast of the field. Some people will say it's Satan, but it's not, because Satan is not a serpent in Eden. He's actually cherubim, as he's called a cherubim, an anointed cherubim in Ezekiel 28 when he's in Eden. So he has different attributes. Dragon and serpent and devil are part of that, but he's also Archon, morning star, and a few other things. So I don't want to get too far down that rabbit hole. But just to explain that this is a beast of the field, as it says in Genesis 3:1. And they're created on day 6 before the humans are. Now, we don't know how long that is. You could define from 2 Peter 3, which is kind of like a template for prehistory here. In the beginning, the destruction of fire, the earth that was in the water that perished. Remember, the flood didn't kill the whole earth. And that this fire is reserved for the end time. But in there, a day is like 1,000 years. And that the sun and the moon that's put in the firmament doesn't come along till day 4. So now, and so the MO is the first 3 days would be 1,000 years, and that would continue over the 7 days, because that would be the pattern that God would communicate it to us in, or he would tell you there's a change. Because the term is a day is like 1,000 years for humans. So he's in the creation process, and it's going to be like that for us as in 1,000 years. So now you have possibly up to 1,000 years before this beast of the field is created, when it's created before male and female in great numbers. And so it's already corrupted. Who corrupts it? Likely the fallen angels. You could say just Satan, but you wouldn't have a priest or a priestess unless you would have an organized religion and a culture for it.
Right. That was already established.
Yeah. And in polytheism, the serpent being of the Nahash was bigger than a human and was the most noble and royal being, and was a willing participant because it didn't want to lose its place to what was being offered to Adam, because it was already over the people of day 6. I know I'm mixing in some polytheism here, but just to give you their perspective and this sort of open-ended question as to why is Adam put in singular in the garden to run a plantation that runs from the Nile River to the Euphrates, from Mount Hermon to the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean. And he's raising all sorts of domesticated animals in that land. He is raising grass crops, as you take all of the meanings back to the Hebrew, and not the English does not tell us all of this until you get into the Hebrew, into the further meaning of it. And he's raising orchards all by himself. And then something really weird happens. God says, I need to find a partner for Adam, but I can't find a partner that's suitable for him. But male and female were created separately. And now God is going to create from the rib of Adam to become the mother of all living beings going forward, because Adam has this special spirit breathed into him. So how does she become the mother of all living? A lot of people will ask me, if you have the people of day 6, it's only the 8 that go on the ark. Right? And the sons and Noah are all from the Sethian line, from Eve. I'm open to the fact that the wives would be from the other races, the other 3 races. So you have 4 races and how they show up. But the legal transference of the genealogy goes through the patriarchy in monotheism.
I see. Okay. I'm really curious.
So,
And yeah,
so
go ahead.
anyways, what we're on is the rebellion. So again,
Yeah.
so we can finish what we're talking on.
Sure.
There's an implication there that there's a rebellion before Adam and Eve. And
Right.
if nothing is new under the sun, then you have a corruption of Adam going on, like they corrupted the people of day 6, and perhaps the Nahash people are also a violation against creation. If not, then they just created them, because we're not told, other than it's a beast of the field on day 6, because you would take that back, how it becomes an intelligent, sentient being.
Yes.
In a serpent form, like a seraphim.
Right. Yeah. I was wondering, two questions that came to my mind as you were sharing this, and that was, why did the entity present itself as a serpentine entity to Eve, and why the angelic rebellion landing strip was Mount Hermon out of all the places.
Okay. Yeah. Couple of big things in there, so I'll see whether okay, so the people who argue that the Nahash is as a serpentine being has to be Satan, they'll go into his seraphim form.
Okay.
Right. And he's also a high priest, right? And the seraphim are the high priests before and working in the altar of the throne amongst the fiery stones, as Isaiah 6 talks about, where it introduces us to the idea of the seraphim. And that he has 9 jewels, like the Levites will be given 12 jewels, so priest-like. And in Ezekiel 28, he's the cherubim who also walks amongst the fiery stones as the anointed cherubim, so giving him a priest-like character. So when his fall happens, I mean, that's part of what has to be replaced in the future time in the Melchizedek order, part of the resolution to the angelic rebellion as it fully sort of plays out. But clearly, he's not in Eden according to Ezekiel 28. Otherwise, the Bible would be in contradiction. He would be there as the anointed cherubim. So it's not Satan. He may be influencing them, maybe coaching them, maybe becoming the Avatara effect.
Like a proxy?
And as an example of that, biblically, you have Satan who enters into Judas to give him the courage to go through with betraying Jesus. That's Avatar as the angel, Avatara as a receiver, to receive additional power or knowledge. So he could be doing that. Just as Vishnu is the avatar for Buddha, who's the Avatara, who provided the wisdom to create sort of an evolved Hinduism and Buddhism, so to speak, without being disrespectful there, but just shortening it down. So, and it's not Satan who's punished. So it has to be a serpent type of being. Now, the serpent type of being isn't as we imagine it today.
Okay.
It was degraded. It lost its arms. It lost its wings if they had wings.
Oh, right. Yes.
It loses its legs. It loses its speech. It loses its intelligence as a consequence. And the whole complete species are. So we don't know how the Nahash is created. They could be part of day 6, and God had created another sentient being, and then created male and female after that, maybe after the Nahash had been corrupted, right?
Yeah.
Or the fallen angels did some sort of violation to creation to create beings like themselves, because most of the watchers, Daniel 4 times, it's biblical, Ayir meaning to watch. I'm fully awake. The other source word is Ur with a U versus an I there. Were sons of God that produced most of the giants when they took a physical form in the physical world. And so they were creating creatures after their being. So if people aren't familiar with how I got there with most of them are seraphim angels, there's only 4 groups of watchers. There's archangels, who have a human face. There are seraphim that have a serpent face. There are cherubim that have 4 different faces. And there are Ophanim, which might be known as throne angels. That people would get that term of the New Testament. These are the ones that are in the wheels.
Oh,
in
wheel within
Ezekiel,
wheel?
Yeah, in Ezekiel 1, 3, and 10. So the outside wheels that are concentric, that's Hebrew gagal for wheel. But there's a being that's in there that has one face of a cherubim. It's cherubim-like. It has 4 faces. It's cherubim-like, but one face is a cherubim. I don't know which one, maybe all 4. It doesn't say, but it's different.
Wow.
And that's the Hebrew word ophan. And put
Okay.
on the male plural like cherubim, like seraphim, and you get Ophanim, and that's the term that shows up for this other group of watchers in the book of Enoch, the Ophanim. And how we get there biblically, and they probably should have translated that directly as Ophan or Ophanim in plural, as they do with cherub and cherubim, or seraph and seraphim. But they didn't, so they make it more difficult to find that information. So it has to be sort of one of those as the heads of the groups of various orders below them. And the seraphim are in charge of governance and religion. And we see part of that in Daniel 4, where the watcher comes from the presence of God with edicts and governments, and that's going to likely be the seraphim based on the hierarchy that they control over the 4 sides of the throne. So, and there's a 4th presence in there as well, but I don't want to get too deep into the minutia here, but just to get the seraphim idea on the table. So now if we look at the gods that are being worshipped as what we would understand as fallen angels in pantheons all around the world, 90% of them are serpents or reptilians.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
So like your Uraeus god, if people aren't familiar with that, that's in the ancient Middle East. It's a flying serpent god used to describe Baal or El in the Canaanite pantheon, used to describe Osiris and his consort in the Egyptian pantheon. And most of the angels all around the world within the pantheons, as I say, are all serpentine. So dragon creator gods in China who create the sons of heaven, the sons of them. They're watcher gods, Tengu, and 2 groups, Tengu and dragon gods. And so in the Popol Vuh, you have like Quetzalcoatl, who's a feathered serpent. And throughout Central, South, and North America, in the First Nations, you have a similar group of beings that are serpentine. And these are seraphim angels as feathered serpents, right?
Right.
It's the same imagery all around the world that populates inexplicably all cultures around the world on all continents. And the top gods are all just different vernacular names for the same gods. So you can have, like, as Baal, as we get in the Bible, Osiris would be the same god in Egypt, Zeus in Greece, likely Enki in Sumeria, and on and on and on. And all they are just given different vernacular names for the different cultures around the world, and they have the same positions. So they would create beings to get to the point here that would be reflective of themselves and to honor themselves. And so as a preferred being, they want them to be reptilian like them. So when we get the creation of the giants in Genesis 6, which is probably another corruption, nothing new is under the sun, going with that building of that term with this unexplained Nahash being, they're going to create giants, and they're called before the flood and shortly again after the flood serpents, just as the gods are called serpents. Why? Because when they take a physical form, they pass on DNA. And people would say, well, how do they take a physical form? They're spirit beings. Yes, they are. But we get a word when they left their habitation in the time of the flood to create the violations, giants in Jude 1:6, they left their habitation. And that's the Greek word oikaterion. means a dwelling place for the spirit. So there's a dwelling place for the spirit that's in heaven. And by inference, you would have a dwelling place of the spirit in the earth. And you have to have that dwelling place to interact physically in the world. They can be here in spirit form or take a body. So we get that term we'll use only one other time in the New Testament, 2 Corinthians 5:2, where it says that we have our dwelling place on the earth, but we dwell for our home in heaven, our house in heaven, for the future time. And we want to get there sooner. Well, that house in heaven is oikoteria. So we have our own house here, same sort of allegory. And so they have this ability to take a physical form. How do we know this? The Bible tells us this. It's just that the church doesn't want us to know it tells us this. So in Hebrews 13, we're warned to be nice to strangers, lest we come across an angel unaware. So they'll be physical. We can't tell the difference unless they want to show that they're an angel. In Genesis 18, and just to use an Old Testament one, and there's lots of different places you could go in the Bible, but to show one of each, you have Jehovah the Elohim, who's going to interact directly with Abraham. This is Lord God, as we understand it in the KJV, Jehovah, Lord God, Elohim. And he's going to bring along two angels, but Abraham doesn't recognize them as heavenly beings at first, and then learns that they are. So again, they take a physical form, they're eating, drinking, interacting, and then the two angels go to Sodom, and they're instantly recognized as being judges or angels, and they're there to judge. And so they can make themselves known as angels. So we understand they can take a physical form, and they can take a gender of their choice as well, because they can choose their physical form, but they would generally will take a physical form in how they appear in their spiritual form, however that looks with that spiritual aspect. But as with a seraphim being a serpent angel, as with a cherubim having a face of a lion, a face of a human, a face of a bird, and a face of a bull, they will take a form like that. And with the case of a cherubim, they will take one of those faces. So you might see a sphinx with a lion head or a human head. As you move into the Middle East, you're going to have these cherubs. That is, again, the transliteration of cherub, because it should be pronounced with a K as it comes out, not with a CH. And they're going to have a bull's face, and you're also going to see bird-faced ones like gargoyles. That's the bird-faced one. And they'll take a form of that. So you might say the seraphim would produce, if the seraphim produced giants that looked like serpents, and they were called serpents in the first few generations, both before and after the flood, with another incursion or survival, then you might now look on the linemen of Moab and Gad a little bit differently in the Bible.
Yes.
Especially when they're called mighty ones, Gibborim.
Yeah. By the way, for those that are watching and listening right now, if you have any questions, feel free to put that in the chat, and then we can look at them, and then we can post them near the end of the broadcast. But I'm really curious your thoughts on this, and that is when it comes to like Freemasonry and secret societies, why is there like the Egyptian pantheon, goddess deities that surround those particular societies, and then it seems like with some other societies they go around like Greek gods. Like why is this the case with these societies?
So we sort of have to look at, from a biblical perspective, what happens at the time of Babel. And with the confusion of the languages.
Oh, the Tower of Babel. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, the Tower of Babel. And people are going to migrate around the world. They were instructed to do that. They refused. But now they're being forced to. And they're going to go move amongst peoples who are the Aboriginals that are there. And for a lot of people, that's going to be a bit saying, well, how does he get there? Well, when you get into giants after the flood, like the Raphaim, they're defined as Aboriginal giant peoples of the land. So when the Canaanites illegally move into, as Hamites, illegally move into the covenant land, they're going to intermarry with the Raphaim and other types of giants that are there that are named biblically, instead of going to Africa where Ham has their land allotted. But you have emergence then of peoples and different names with the different languages for the same gods, right? You have to understand how that sort of comes about. And so if you have the descendants of Japheth then migrating up to Asia Minor and into Greece and then into the islands, they're going to have different names based on the language that's been changed, because now you have a Hamitic language, you have a Semitic language, and many variations, right?
Right.
And so the group of people, as we would understand the peoples that they're moving to live amongst, are called secularly Indo-Europeans or Indo-Aryans, and they're going to have their own language, which is, you get into the language of etymology, it's PIE, P-I-E for the acronym, Proto-Indo-European, and they have their own language that now is going to merge into those other languages and show up. So you have an original religion of the giants, you have a version at Babel that Nimrod imposes, that's going to be moved into a different language that's going to merge with another language to the peoples that they're moving amongst. And in book 2, I really dig into how we know these tribes are aboriginals. And I take those tribes back to specific patriarchal giants created after the flood. And the Raphaim show up as a tribe of giants. People may not be familiar with this, twice in the Bible. In the War of Giants in Genesis 14, and then in Genesis 15, when Abraham is provided the covenant land, which is the same dimensions as Eden, because it's God's land. You start to connect some dots here with the consistency, and one of the reasons for humankind being created, quote unquote, from Gary Wayne, my speculation, we are the resolution to the angelic rebellion, which is why the fallen angels hate us, which is what's being played out with that intimate sort of reaction from the fallen angels. And that Raphaim show up as peoples in that land. Rapha, Hebrew Rapha 7495, means to heal. And when you see it like in Raphael, as in the Apocrypha of the KJV for an angel, Raphael means God heals, or the healer of God. It has a derivative word, 7496, in the lexicon, which means a demon spirit or a disembodied spirit of the dead, of the giants, because their spirits don't go to sleep like humans. Ecclesiastes 10. Our spirits, when we die, go to heaven, and the thousands of other references in the Bible say our spirit goes to sleep when we die. Then connect that with Ecclesiastes 10. It goes in that sleep state to heaven, ready for our whichever resurrection that we did as we were on in life will dictate. We wait for that resurrection. These are counterfeit spirits passed on as demons, the 7496 Rapha, from the fallen angels. And they're either going to wander the earth as demons. When Jesus dispossesses devils in the KJV, that should not be translated as devil. It should be translated as daemon. Greek is the word there for demon, which is a demon evil spirit. And these devils, demon spirits, are described as unclean and evil spirits. And this is what Jesus is removing versus an angelic spirit, which is higher up in the spiritual organization than a disembodied spirit. But again, just to sort of keep it as clean as possible here. And so, if you're going to use devil to describe Satan, it's not daemon that's in Greek, it's diablos. So the KJV translators didn't do us any favors on the translation, just as they didn't do on the Pacific. They mix up different orders in the New Testament, like exousia dunamis, they interchange them as powers, and then they use different words for those two orders as well. So you get really confused as to which are the angelic orders. So you have to take those angelic orders back to Greek in the New Testament to find out which ones are which ones as they're translated into English. I do that for people in book 2 as well, by the way, and show you the hierarchy that they're in. So anyways, this disembodied spirit is a derivative of 7495 Rapha, and 7497 is also a derivative of 7495, which is the word giant or tribe of giants that the Raphaim are. And so you also have in that land, you've got a tribe in there called the Perizzites. We do not have a patriarch for the Perizzites. You also have the triple K there. We don't have, without running into conflict with the Bible, a patriarch for. You have the Cadmonites, I would say Cadmonim, for a giant tribe. You have the Kenites, I would say Kenim, and you have the Kenizzites, the Kenizim. And people will say, well, no, we have Kenaz. Well, we do, as possible patriarch. Problem is that comes up in Genesis 36, not Genesis 15. It's out of sync. They show up before the tribe would show up. So it's not that tribe. And Genesis 36 is an add-on to the Table of Nations, but it provides for us the Dukes of Seir, the Alephim, as the Catholic encyclopedia likes to define the as in the plural. Aleph is the Hebrew word for Duke. Alephim is a term that's used throughout polytheism as it gets transliterated into fairy and elf as particular bloodlines. And these are Horim giants, not Horite, Horim. And Horites are used as well, but these are Horim as they're defined in Deuteronomy 2 as giants Rapha. So they're a giant like the Raphaim, but distinctly as Horim giants, and they're going to provide daughters to Eliphaz and to Esau, and both the latter being Oholibama, and with Eliphaz it will be Timnah. These are Horim pureblood daughters to start a new dynasty with of hybrid giants between humans, and of the line that lost the inheritance to Jacob, lost the birthright blessing, and lost the Messianic promise. And they're creating these other tribes, and there's going to be a mix of giants and hybrid giants, 7 to 9 feet tall versus 10 and larger for the purebred giants, that are going to try and wipe Israel from the face of the earth, because they're going to name that tribe after another tribe that is living in the Petra area, who the Amalekites are going to go live amongst in part. And Amalek is a hybrid of Timnah and Eliphaz. And the Amalekim giants are listed in Genesis 14, which also predate that patriarch that people would have you believe. A couple hundred years difference.
Wow.
And so again, if we want to resolve what's being looked at in the Bible, we have to let it speak for itself. And it starts in Deuteronomy 2, provides a list of names of giants, but there's many more. We just don't recognize them as giants. And in this case, you can take this triple K back in the Ugaritic text, which is written in the original Semitic, which Hebrew is a derivative of, and come up with the same words like Raphaim, RPM, in the original vowelless Semitic and Ugaritic texts, created by Baal and the Baalim Council after the flood, who were healers. They could heal themselves and others, and were giants, and were the royal bloodlines. And so now we have a direct parallel with the same words, with essentially a very closely related word, and using the same terms, including GBR, as Gibborim, as mighty, as it comes through, and also a specific tribe of giants named Gibbor in the Ugaritic text. In the tribes of Datanu, which is the assembly of the giants, like the ring lords underneath the Baalim Council at Mount Hermon, which is called Saphon in the Ugaritic text. So lots of different sort of giants, but again, we have this alignment that we're not showing a patriarch for who these individuals are, although we can take them back to a specific patriarch in the Ugaritic text from not only the god, but then the offspring first named, and that's going to be passed on sort of eponymously to a patriarch in the tribe that he creates. Now, let's bring this to full circle to underline what we're talking about. Rapha does not show up as a patriarch in the Table of Nations either, as giants. There is one that is named as the patriarch in the book of Joshua for the Anakim giants, and his name is Arba. His name doesn't show up in the Table of Nations, but he's listed as the patriarch, the founder of the Anakim giants. So what do we learn from that? Raphaim patriarchs, the Aboriginals, were not listed in the Table of Nations. Only humans were, and their descendants. But with Nimrod, we don't get any descendancy after that. One takes it, he probably intermarried like those in Genesis 36 did, from Eliphaz and Esau with those two bloodlines. And also, we get 9 patriarchless tribes in the 70 listed in Genesis 10 and First Chronicles 1. Who are those 10 the 10 patriarchless tribes? You have Canaan, who has an offspring of Heth and Sidon. We have those. But the rest, whether it's Amorites, Jebusites, what are some of the the whole sort of list that sort of comes down on those lists, don't have a patriarch. What we're told is, well, they come from Sidon and Heth and Canaan. Oh, really? Well, why isn't that done similarly in the rest of the Table of Nations? It doesn't fit.
Yeah.
And these are the families, which you take that back to the Hebrew, it basically means, yes, a family, but a different kind, different species. Something different is going on. So you can actually trace the patriarchs of those tribes as being Raphaim back to names and places that were named after the giants and or gods who came from specific gods out of the Baalim Council. So Amorites, Emori, Emoriy, as it shows up in Hebrew transliterated, comes from Amur or Amaru in the Baalim Council. And he has has one giant that he creates that's named Amar as well. And now you have the word that's coming down for the eponymous name for Amori in the singular. And all the giant patriarchs, whether it's Hori for the Horim, Hori in singular, Hivi for Hivim, all of these are singular, but they're talking about a tribe of giants as well. So it's patriarchal. And that's why you get the I am male plural. And in ancient ology, the I am plural was used to denote a majestic bloodline of the giants from their celestial parents. And so it was an international sort of suffix that was sort of added on. So it represents this majestic royal bloodline.
Man, that's fascinating, because I sometimes wonder, in the Bible, especially like Deuteronomy and other places, why you're hearing all the line of this, the line of that, the line of this, line of that. And it's like it makes more sense because of everything that you have unpacked and what we're talking about here with the bloodlines. It's like that was written there to just give further credence to where they came from, right?
Exactly. Oh, and I should correct myself on something I said. I said 10 patriarchless. Should be 9 patriarchless tribes. There's just people if they're correcting me on that. What's the other one? Well, no, it's not there. It's 9, not 10. So and it's important to understand the genealogies that the Bible is outlaying for us, because it helps us to understand the world. that we
Yes.
live in.
Yes, it does. It really does. So, guys, if you want to dive even deeper into all that we're talking about today, you can scan the QR code on your screen, and it'll point you right to purchasing the book, Genesis 6 Conspiracy Part 2. And Gary's also written Part 1, but today we've been focusing more so on Part 2. And he has it on Kindle, Audible, on paperback. And you can buy the book wherever bookstores are at as well. And I kind of have some bonus questions, if you don't mind.
Yep.
Gary. Okay. And you might have talked about this a little bit in Part 2, but I'm curious regarding the whole quantum topic, the quantum veil when it pertains to the Nephilim, and fallen angels, like and then we have this, increase of technology with quantum and Microsoft creating quantum chips and all that. What are some of your reactions and thoughts on some of this converging technology today and what happened back then?
And just to be clear, so we're talking on the same term, quantum as in quantum computing, quantum mechanics, and interdimensional application.
Yeah, exactly. That's how I would define it. Yes.
Right. And so, and as we understand the world we live in from the Bible, we have three locations of heaven, for example. You have what's in the firmament, you have what's outside the firmament, and then you have the place where God lives.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I understand there's 7 dimensions that they talk about in polytheism, but typically those are within the firmament. There's in these little portal areas where the hail might come from and the other things that the Bible talks about bringing out. So you get the 7 the same way, they just make it a little bit different. But in that, you also have the third dimension that we're told about is so we have the physical world we live in.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You have heaven, but you also have Hades and Sheol. Hades being Greek for the same word as Sheol in the Old Testament, that is known by 1,000 names around the world as the other world, Anwin, Shambhala, Arcata. I won't go through all of them, but you go through any of the different languages, they have a different name for the same place, Valhalla, for just a couple other examples. So that's the place that is located within the earth, but likely in another dimension.
Okay. Yeah, I was about to say.
And not that there can't be something physically going on in the physical earth, but in another dimension. And so when we look at that other dimension, that's also going to include the location of the pit prison and the lake, and likely the lake of fire.
In Revelation?
Yes, as in separate locations and in a different dimension. And so we get this term hell that is conflated into one. And we get an allegory of Gehenna that would be related as a fiery place on the earth in the Old Testament. But the location is in the earth, either physically or in another dimension. And I think it fits much better in another dimension. And that we need to separate those terms. And again, the translators didn't do us any favors when they roll them all into one, but then we have these other locations and we're not told why. And so keep that in mind. And the pit prison is where the fallen angels were put in. That's the prison that's being referenced in the Bible, right? And in polytheism, their heaven isn't above. Earth is above. Their heaven is in Hades and Sheol. And so like Baal would go back and forth in the Ugaritic texts from Sheol and Hades to the physical world to inspect his physical world realm as well, because he was the chief god over both. And at Mount Hermon, you have the gateway of Hades, where the curse of Harum Anathema was sworn by angels, according to the book of Enoch, which is the name that Mount Saphon, Mount Sion, Mount Shenir, Mount Sirion, the latter 3 are biblical names for Hermon. And Saphon is the Ugaritic text for that same mountain where that oath was sworn, because that word harem is the root word for Herman, and means a curse and accursed.
Oh, I didn't
So
know
it's the
that.
accursed,
Wow.
yeah, it's the accursed oath, anathema. As you take that back in the Hebrew, ecclesiastical oath to carry it out to the end, no matter what the consequences are. They are sworn to that. And the basis for our legal-based society, where the oaths come from, which we're told not to participate biblically in. And this is the place where Jesus goes to announce he's going to create his church, and changes Peter's name to Peter, representing a rock. But he's declaring it to the gateway of Hades, where Baal would come through, that not even the gates of Hades are going to overcome this church. Right?
Right. Amen.
That's not a coincidence. He's giving them notice.
Right. Wow.
I won't go into that. That's a whole story in itself in terms of how you get into Colossians 2, Ephesians 4, 1 Peter 3, and Psalm 68. And it's going to give you sort of the whole story of what Jesus was doing in the grave and who he was talking to, and the spectacle and the parading that went on to after he was crucified. But that's the first step there is to make that declaration. So yeah, when we look at Mount Hermon and in relationship to the Baalim Council, understand that in Hades and Sheol, that's where they rule from. That's where the disembodied spirits want to go to their heaven when they die. But they're either going to be roaming the earth as dead spirits, right? Spirits of the ghosts that we would know, demons, or they're going to go to the pit prison in the same place as the fallen angels did for the crimes against creation and the Holy Spirit, waiting to be sent to the lake of fire. That's talked about in Matthew 25. That's reserved for the devil and his angels. These ones that are in the pit prison that are giant spirits are the mighty ones in Ezekiel 32, as in Gibborim. And these are called terrible ones, a retim, which is part of the word Ugarit. This is the city of King Og, and Arit, Og the terrible one. And these terrible ones that are listed in Ezekiel 32, who did terrible things to humankind when they were on earth, were sent to the pit prison. So those are the two places the disembodied spirits don't want to go to. So their polytheist religion is designed to somehow get them to where their gods are, was where they want to be. So they went through all of these polytheist rituals and knowledge to try and get there. So in the Ugaritic text, to bring this back to that, when a royal king, a giant king died, the one still in the physical body would go through portals to deliver them to the other world, where Baal would be ruling from. And so we need, right? And that is sort of the crossing over in death. So when we look at the word Rapha as 7496, it can also be used as death, as in death in locations where people are dead in. They're referring to these demon spirits. In Ezekiel 39, we get a very interesting term in the Gog War, where you have the passengers or the travelers, depending on which English translation that you're using, at the time of the burial of the army of Gog. That's the Hebrew word abar, which is also associated with death in a lot of locations, as in the book of Job, and means as a crossing over to the place of the dead. And these are mighty ones that are talked about as passengers, and the death of the mighty ones that they seem to have an interest in.
Wow. That's a lot to digest and process. Wow, that's fascinating. And part of that crossing over, do you think that ties into the veil piece as well, or we're talking about something different there?
Well, I think a veil is sort of an allegory for an opening into another dimension,
Right.
when that veil either is ripped or removed, right?
Right.
So, and we need to also understand that in polytheism, interdimensional and portal travel is sort of dogmatic. It's doctrine. So they go back and forth between dimensions all the time, usually just the one. So whether or not you're talking about in a fairy tale, as in Elaphim matriarchal bloodlines, if they're talking into a mirror and they're talking to somebody on the other side, that's a demon spirit on the other side. A mirror is a portal, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
They work it into all sorts of these types of things. And so we should look at this as part of understanding that there's an angelic technology, to get back to where we started here, that has something to do with quantum mechanics and quantum computing, and that where they marry AI up to it so that they can not only search in multiple dimensions, but in multiple locations in those dimensions at the same time, because the quantum is kind of like a rifle shot versus a shotgun spread, to use some sort of analogy, which the AI is going to provide. And that it's emergence of technologies that is also going to be, and we're starting to see now with the AI and social credits and data mining, a common emerging of the digital currency technologies, and who knows what else is going to be merged into that. But understand, this is interdimensional technology that is angelic technology, that is part of the rule of the fallen angels that they provided their followers. So we need to understand the angelic technology that was provided before the flood is greater than what we have today.
Yeah, it's nothing new under the sun, right?
Yeah, that's partly how we get there, and why Jesus wants us to understand it's going to be like the days of Noah, both 600 years before the flood and 350 years after the flood. And then getting back to that template in 2 Peter 3, where you have this fire that was in the beginning that's reserved for the end time. Roll that into the flood narrative. And if we had this angelic technology that we're just catching up to today, that had the ability to destroy the earth by fire, but that's reserved for the end time, as 2 Peter talks about, then what would God do? He would intercede. God intercedes, and what does he do? He brings flood, right? Instead of, so that all the names, brings the water and has survivors. And so that all the names in the book of life that were written there from before creation will have an opportunity to leave their names in that book or have it blotted out. That's why he intercedes, because the Adamites have a specific commission as a resolution to the angelic rebellion. Why they want to destroy us from the face of the earth, which was the intent, to destroy us by creating their spurious offspring, the giants, to destroy us from the face of the earth and not let us reach our destiny to be raised up like angels, and to judge those angels for the crimes they committed against us, and to be the inheritors of it, of eternity, because we're going to be adopted through the resurrection that they didn't know was going to happen. Otherwise, they wouldn't have had Jesus crucified. 1 Corinthians talks about that. And
that's powerful. Wow.
That's powerful. And so they're trying to prevent us from reaching our destiny. And so they create spurious offspring so they don't have blood directly on their hands. You don't hear of fallen angels blaspheming God. They know the full power of God. They use their offspring and their followers to do that. And so when we look at this technology that was there, and we look at polytheist accounts, they talk about this technology.
Really?
They do. Yeah. And that this technology is what is the antediluvian knowledge. It's the emerald tablet. It's the pearls of wisdom. It is the the golden apples. It has 1,000. It's the archives of the Masons. It has 1,000 different terms of this ancient knowledge that they want to get redeveloped that was before the flood, because they look at that as the golden age of Atlantis, right? And the technology that you get associated with alien technology and a lot of that sort of mythos. And that this technology was understood by polytheists because in their accounts leading up to the flood, and in the accounts of Enoch, son of Cain, not Enoch, son of Jared, and Lamech of that line, not of the Sethian line, because there's one of each in each of those, and the sons of Lamech, you're going to have two pillars that are created. And on it are directions to where all the antediluvian knowledge was hidden under the Great Pyramid. That fellow by the name of Hermes or Harmine takes to Nimrod at the Tower of Babel to be applied there, including the religion in their accounts. And so they created two pillars. Why? Not because they had too much information, they couldn't get it on one. They didn't know what was coming, whether it was flood or fire. So they created one that could survive a flood and one that could survive a destruction by fire, because they wanted this information to cross the flood. And so it's the one that obviously survives a flood that Hermes finds, that he takes to Nimrod, who now has an ability to do things that weren't meant to be done, just as it was before the flood, thus the intercession by God again. And that word Babelu in Akkadian, which is Babel in the Bible, that we understand as confusion of languages in Hebrew, it means Bab as in a gate or a portal, and El or ILU as a god. ILU is a transliteration of El in the Mesopotamian languages. And so now you could have had Nimrod developing technology to go into heaven or into Hades, one to invade heaven as Antichrist will in the end time, throw down some of the starry host in Daniel 8. And we also have a war in heaven at Revelation 12 at the same time. And maybe into the pit prison to release the gods he's introducing that they're worshiping, that have been put in there. And again, in the end time, you're going to have the pit prison released in Revelation 9. So he's like an Antichrist type figure, right? In so many different ways, and maybe with the same kind of technology. And so now, what are some of the other examples, just to sort of underline what we're talking about here? They had the ability to corrupt everything. That's the Hebrew word shakath. So biblically, corrupt everything on the earth and all flesh. And shakath means to pervert, to ruin, to destroy, to decay, things like that. So if all flesh is perverted, is that just the bloodline intermarriage of giants with the Adamites through the Seth line, because the Canaanite line would have been completely perverted? Possibly part of, but also perhaps DNA manipulation, which we're just catching up to today.
Like
that we call,
that
we call chimera science, which is based in Greek mythology to create these hybrid beings through DNA manipulation, have multiple parts of a being. So they had DNA capability as well. We're just catching up to the angelic technology that was in full application just before the flood.
My goodness. Wow. Looks like we have a question from the audience, and that is, do you know anything about the Vril Society or the secret societies that worship the Reptilians?
Sure. And I'll cover the Vril off in book 1. Particularly as it relates to the Rosicrucians and National Socialism in Germany. And yes, that's National Socialism. It was the National Socialist Workers' Party. Don't let people tell you that was a right-wing group. it's how they brainwash us. So, and that was the eastern branch of Western progressivism that went underground for obvious reasons after World War II, and has resurfaced and will play a role in the end time as well. And we see how powerful it is today. So again, we need to understand the world that we live in. So Vril is something that's in the blood and is a big part of Rosicrucian belief system. So where do Rosicrucians sort of fit in here? Well, there's a hierarchy, and I'll give the thelemic tree organizational structure in book 2, but I'll talk about who the Rosicrucians are in book 1.
Okay.
And so they're part of the trunk orders that I talk about in book 2. So look at Freemasonry at the first level of adept. Then you move up to Illuminati. Then you move up to the Rosicrucians, which is bringing in lower bloodline people to make them first level adepts. And then some will move up to the bottom half of the Rosicrucian order. Rosicrucian order and up is as pure blood as you can get through the bloodlines and back to specific patriarchal giants and celestial mafia godfathers, fallen angels. I'd like to use that term tongue in cheek.
Sure.
And so that's populated by sort of the lower group of families and representatives, but then you move into the Committee of 300 families.
Okay.
Then you move into the Invisible Council of 33 families. And then you move into the original 13 families, and that's the Western secret society organizations. And there's all of those organizations that are parallel around the world in different cultures. So understand when we talk about the 13 families, that's the Western side, and not the pseudo blue bloods that a lot of people like to name, like the DuPonts and that. They're all funded by the Rothschilds, who aren't even part of the 13 families. They would have intermarried enough probably over the last few hundred years to be maybe into the Committee of 300, because they're in the banking, and world trade, economics, all funnel into the Committee of 300. They were originally named the Bauers in Germany, changed their name to Rothschilds when they set up the London Bank. And they were funded to become banking outside the church after the fall of the Knights Templars, which probably don't have time to get into in the Knights Templar. But understand that the Rosicrucians, who are pure bloodline, they're in charge of the history and the religion and keep that alive, right? And through that, genealogies is also sort of in there, and Vril is a significant part of the Rosicrucian belief, and it means something in the blood, and it's something special in the blood, and it's through their bloodlines in part of how they track their genealogy that they keep record on through the family tree, which is their creation, which has roots that go into the ground to where? Into Hades and Sheol, and back to specific celestial mafia godfathers, right? And
there we go.
And the various trees of the various branches as that family comes down through the generations, versus the thelemic tree that is the cedar tree for the secret societies. They have like a cedar of Lebanon that has branches that would intersect, but the branches come down and there's a hierarchy within the branches. So you would have, for example, like the Davos crew that would intersect into as the main group of goes into the Committee of 300, but it would have a whole bunch of others organizations further down, right? So imagine it in that sort of hierarchy, and the genealogical tree is an elm tree, typically in the most pure form, just as elm is Orme and order of Ormus and things like that in Gnosticism. It's their most holy tree. Also can include ash and oak trees as well. They're very similar, same sort of umbrella type of tree. And
that ties in with like the Druids and all that,
with
right?
the oak. Yeah, they utilize the oak, and they take that back to trees that were on Mount Hermon, all of them.
Oh, okay.
And you
kind of circling back here.
And you can get there biblically with that, which I lay out in book 2. So,
okay.
Just to give the people sort of an idea. So,
thank you.
Yeah, so this Vril, if you could backwards engineer it like the National Socialists believed in Germany, is that you could recreate the Aryans. If you recall what I talked about earlier, in polytheism and secularism, Indo-Aryans, Indo-Europeans were the aboriginal giants after the flood and before the flood, with the Zoroastrian religion that I think that I mentioned.
Oh, yeah, right.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Okay. So what they were trying to do is, how do we get back to our original nature in this purity where we're going to be blonde haired, blue eyed, and pale skinned, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Atlanteans were described that way: red hair, hazel eyes, pale skin, blonde hair, blue eyed, pale skin. And were from the Seraphim Watchers, where the dark haired ones would come from a cherubim watcher. Remember, it has one face, and you can see an Anunnaki, which is one face with the wings on reliefs, that has dark hair, black hair. Their offspring, like Gilgamesh, would look just like them. So there's dark-haired giants too that I cover off in book 2 versus the main ones in book 1. And so they want to get back to their Atlantis that they believed was Thule or Tula or Asgard in the Norse version. And it's either a different civilization, one of 4, 7, 9, or 11, depending on which occult version you're talking about, or it's the same as Atlantis. But the Atlanteans were called serpents, described as serpents, with blonde hair, red hair, blue eyes, hazel eyes, and very pale skin. And so are Scythians, which are part of the Indo-Aryan group. And these are the ones that migrated up the Danube River, part of the Tuatha De Danann Danube River, not from the tribe of Dan, as they would have us believe, but from the giants. And the Tuatha De Danann were also fairy folk, pale-skinned folk that were giants in Ireland, England, Scotland, Wales, part of the same sort of groups, right? And so they want to get back to the purity Aryan stock of giants. And so they want to be able to backwards engineer with the Vril. And that gave you a special authority and position as one of the nobilities. Aryan means noble ones and ability. They populated the top 2 classes. And so they were also moving forward with the new man concept, creating a new Nephilim. Right? And they wanted nothing but blonde-haired, blue-eyed, and they believed they were descendants of these Aryans. And they actually had somebody by the name of Horberger, which is an astronomer and an author, that believed that their specific group of blonde-haired, blue-eyed Aryans were descended originally from these original giants that were described the same sort of way. So, yes, something in Vril is something that is very real within the occult societies, and particularly the Rosicrucians. And now it's not the blood that you need to be more focused on. You should be more focused on the gene. So how we get there is, understand when I talked about Genesis 36 with Timnah and Oholibamah marrying Esau with the latter and Eliphaz with Timnah to create new dynasties. The Rh negative blood is passed on through the matriarchal bloodline in their belief system. And again, whether or not that's true or not, it's not what we believe that counts. It's what they believe and what they do with that belief system. But typically, they probably can make a scientific case for that if they wanted to, but I'll leave that for them to do. So, but it's not the Rh negative that we should be focused on. It is a manifestation. And the argument that this would go back to being part of the giants because they're created after humans is that Rh negative is missing the D antigen. So the argument logistically or logically is how do you add something into the positive bloodlines that's not there?
Right.
Understand that blood types come from the genes. So it's the gene you have to follow. So coincidentally, that's where genealogy comes from.
The bloodlines, yes.
Genetics, yes, the bloodlines.
Yeah.
And not coincidentally, they actually call their specific original bloodlines as a gens, Gens. So you will have the LB gens, that's part of the northern bloodlines that the Windsor family would be part of. And LB gens in Latin is basically going to mean pale white, and gens to a specific patriarch, a single patriarch, because you take that back. So that's where you get royal names like Albert, Alberta, anything associated with that would go back to likely Albion as a post-Diluvian giant, along with Gog and Magog, that would also have their own genses. And so that's one of the major ones that is said to be part of the Windsor bloodline. And they're O negative, by the way, the most pure of the and rare of the bloodlines. And then you have another one that would, I won't go forever on this, but to give people an understanding what we're talking about, is you have the black nobility of Italy that's part of the larger black nobility that takes their bloodlines back to the original senators, the 100 families of senators of Rome. And so that's called the Julia gens. There's a couple other ones in there, but Julia one is one that comes down through Caesar and Augustus as the Julia gens. And the Julia gens, as that goes back into Proto-Latin, into Etruscan, which are Scythians, which are Indo-Aryans, and the original Aboriginal settlers that settled on the Septimonium, the 7 hills of Rome, and Vaticanus Hill was a branch hill of Palatine Hill. They were known as Romulus and Remus, the founders in mythology. Who was the parent? The parent was Mars in the Latin pantheon and Ares in the Greek pantheon.
Oh, there we go.
These were giants. And you have at least 2 bloodlines of Romulus and Remus that's coming down. And then there's there's a few other gens in there. And then the other one, just to give an example on, is you have Acredigens. And this one's important because it's kind of more of maybe part of the dark-haired giants. And the Credigens comes through Crete. KRT is the original Semitic for Crete.
Okay.
And there's also, well, I won't go down that rabbit hole. I'll keep it simple. So when we get, you have to understand that Crete was a area under the influence of Zeus where he spent a lot of time. Now Zeus is a post-Diluvian chief god versus Kronos being the parent god before the flood. You want to understand prehistory, parent gods ruled before the flood, offspring gods rule after the flood, offspring gods inherit all of the mythos and position of the parent gods because they move up as in rank and order of an army, Saba, host, because the parent gods go to the pit prison for the crimes they committed. So they move up in the order, which how Baal becomes the god in the Bible that we're more familiar with than El, because El's in the pit prison already. Offspring gods will go to the pit prison for the same crimes as well after the flood that they commit, but I don't want to start another rabbit hole here. So Zeus is the offspring god equivalent with Baal and is Baal after the flood for the most part. But at least in a similar position. I think they're the same. Zeus is going to marry Alcmene, a human female, in their history and mythology to produce Hercules. And Hercules produces a bloodline of kings called the Herculides that produces the Gyges kings, or Gyes king, G-I-G A-S-G-I-I-Y-E-S. So there's an A and an E. That A and the E after the G, the second G, will dictate whether that is pronounced with a Y or a G sound, meaning plural or singular. So the Greek word for giant is Gyges, Gyes for plural. And it produces Gigantes as earthborn, but more as Earthborn is born through human females, because there's several groups of giants, including the Gigantes, which are these 100-armed giants before the flood, and one of them is named Gyges as well, as a giant being, but of a different type of giant. But we get the word giant coming down through Gigantes, again, not through with the A spelling, which would be singular, as in Gigantes or Gigantes, but through the E, which is the plural, which is Giantes, shortened to giant as it comes through Old French. Okay, so understand how this all sort of connects. Now, these Gyges kings are Herculidean kings that rule in Assyria after the flood, that rule in Asia Minor and in parts of Greece, both part on Crete, which produced the Philistines, and the Seraphim, Karet, for the Seraphim as the original giants, the Casualhim that are there, and the Parathim that the Philistines will intermarry with before migrating back to the land of Gaza, which will give you more meaning to Deuteronomy 2 as you get to the end in terms of the giant tribes that they're talking about. And so these are the Herculidean Gyges kings that produces kings named like Gog and Magog and Albion. And so this is the Cretagens that comes from Zeus. That's another one of the bloodlines that is very, very important in the West. But there's bloodlines and gens all around the world. So when we talk about bloodlines, we need to talk more about the gens. And the bloodline, particularly as it manifests Rh negative, is a manifestation of the gene that's passed through the mother. And all of this starts to help us understand why Rh negative might jump a generation or two in terms of how it implements, but it's still coming down through the mother's side.
Okay. Wow. Well, thank you so much for unpacking that. Wow, that is amazing. And going and zooming right deep in there. Our last bonus question here is: there's been a lot of word of this 3i Atlas going on. Do you think it's some sentient alien orb, or do you think it's just a rock floating in space?
I mean, who knows? But let's look at the name first. Atlas. He is the king of Atlantis, ruling over 10 demigod kings. Atlas is the son of Poseidon and Clymene. He is a giant. That is an Antichrist type figure before the flood. And Atlantis is destroyed by the flood, just as the New Age is the new Atlantis that they want to bring about. In Daniel 2 and 7 and Revelation 12, 13, and 14, we'll talk about these 10 kings, these 10 toes, these 10 horns of the seventh empire. That's the new Atlantis of the end time that they're trying to bring about. So understand in science, because it is what created mysticism to hold that knowledge. As I explained in book 1, they're going to name everything in science and astronomy after the pantheon of the gods, whom they honor, because science and the mystery schools are all part of the 7 sacred sciences of that polytheist religion before the flood that crosses the flood that we talked about as Zoroastrianism and at Babel. So Atlas and the third eye. So they've well named it to mean what they want it to mean. And the third eye is like that small horn of a unicorn, of a cherubim, as it's understood as an allegory that has a special knowledge that comes through that third eye or horn. Those are the 2 allegories for the third eye. And that Antichrist is the little horn that rises amongst the 10 horns in the end time. And it's applied to what might be thought of as a technology. So we don't know what they're trying to do with that. I don't think it's an extinction-like event. It's not even likely going to hit the Earth. But only thing we can safely say is they've named it for a purpose, and we don't know what.
And it's not a coincidence that they named it like that, based upon what you just shared, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, look at Elon Musk. He calls a lot of his rockets dragons, right?
Yeah, that's true.
You
Yes.
know, look at the Apollo missions, the Mercury mission. I mean,
Hmm.
they never name anything after monotheism. And university is done on a degree system of attaining knowledge. First degree adept is third degree in mysticism and secret societies in the old system. And so you have all the architecture on most of the universities that are applications of their sciences of architecture, masonry, from the beast empires, you know, right?
Right.
Egypt, Greece, Rome,
Hmm.
Babylon, Persia, and that you're going to graduate with a degree in a black Cathar, Albigensian, Mithraic robe in a ritual and a ceremony. I mean, I won't go on and on and on, but
Yeah.
understand everything in science is designed to honor the pantheon of gods and to deny God. The role of the original
Wow.
seven sciences when it was formed into mysticism to keep the knowledge from the Sethites was to degrade God, not give God credit for anything, and to honor their pantheon of gods.
Well, and it just shows you their belief system, their intent with naming these things, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. They do
well,
everything to honor their gods.
wow. Well, guys, if you want to dig even deeper into all of this fascinating content on Genesis 6 and just, unpacking all the research that Gary has done over the years, look up Genesis 6 Conspiracy Part 2. And we also touch a little bit on Part 1 as well. But start with Part 1 and then go to Part 2 and scan that QR code on your screen to have you go right to the page on Amazon to purchase your book. And thank you again so much, Gary, for your time and just going on this adventure of research with us and unpacking all of this.
So my pleasure, and I'll leave people with one other thought, just because
great. Okay.
it's always nice to leave things sort of completed. So when you look at those, the Herculean bloodlines of the Gyges kings that I talked about, this is where the term tyrannos comes from, tyrant.
Tyrant. Oh, yeah.
Right. And that's one of the definitions of Nephilim is tyrant.
No, that comes from Titan. Is Titan
Nope.
connected with that? Oh, no? Okay.
Well, Titan is connected, but differently than you think. So in the old languages, D's and T's were interchangeable. So Adon and Aten would be the same god, Egyptian and what's in the Middle East. So when we look at Titan, it's two T's there, but we would see that biblically as Dedan, right? And then in the Ugaritic text, it's Detanu, the assembly of the Detanu, of the giants, the Titans. Titans are both of heaven and of earth. It can be used for an angelic being or a demigod, just as watcher is a watcher of heaven or a watcher of earth, as they're described in the Ugaritic text as well. This is also a transliteration of the Tuatha De Danann, also understood as the tribe of Danu. The Tuatha Danu, Tuatha meaning a tribe. Anu is a parent god in the Sumerian pantheon. They're all variations of the same word as it goes through the different languages. And so, yes, Tyrannos is different, but it would be for a Titan king, right?
Okay.
So there's, okay. And then the other word is bully that Nephilim is defined as. And the reason why I bring this up is because you're going to have people say, well, it's not a giant in Genesis 6 because it can mean a tyrant as well as a bully. So in both before and after the flood, the gods were known as bulls. As a generic term. Yeah. So in the Ugaritic texts, the Baalim Council are all bulls. And that in the Sumerian pantheon, a good example of an application here of how it follows through to the second level of bull to bully is that the fertility bull goddess Nin has sex with King Lugalbanda of Uruk to produce Gilgamesh,
What? Oh my goodness.
who is also described as a bull.
Wow. I'm thinking
Because
about,
he's so
yeah.
strong, and there's more.
Wow.
And now back to the Ugaritic text, the assembly of the Detanu, the assembly of the giants, they're all also called bulls, as offspring of bulls. That Mount Hermon is the same place as Bashan as we know it biblically, the land of giants as the Old Testament describes Bashan. You have the bulls of Bashan that are mocking Jesus on the cross.
Oh, wow.
These are the spirits of fallen angels that aren't in the pit prison, and or because it's likely both, it's wandering demonic spirits as well of the giants.
Wow, that's fascinating. That reminds me of, when the Israelites were making the golden calf, when Moses was up on the mountain. Now we're connecting some deeper dots here with all that. Wow, that's really crazy. Crazy research you've done on that. That's amazing. Wow. Thank you for sharing that.
And it just gets away, you can then sort of flush away a lot of the misinformation and disinformation haze that the world, they don't want us to get to the sources of meanings. They don't want to have us know about prehistory, so they can keep us in the dark as we move into the end time. So what my books tend to do is teach people why it's important and how to understand prehistory and how that got us to the world we are today, and then how that gets us to what's coming to in the end time. And if indeed, as I think, that we're living in the fig tree generation, it's really important information.
Yes, absolutely. Right. How can we know what's happening now and future if we don't know what happened in history, right? Because history repeats itself.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Gary, for being on Talks with Gallagher. This has been such an intriguing and fascinating conversation. One of those episodes that you need to listen to again. I can unpack further. So, guys, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this episode. For those that want to just dig even deeper into Genesis 6 and all of what that encompasses on a much deeper layer and level, this is the book and episode you need to share with others. So thank you again, Gary, for your time. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for watching and listening. Until next time.